we clearly have access to a remarkable amount of information there, but is access to information necessarily going to lead to action or decisiveness on the part of regulatory bodies or governments or businesses to change their ways? I mean, we can see now all the problems and just how bad they are, but does that mean anyone's going to do anything about them?
Well, I mean, the assumption is that governments are accountable to people. So without that, the answer is no. But with that, I think it's absolutely true that we can, governments will enact policies that the people will support. And absolutely the first thing that we have to do is create a consensus that change is absolutely necessary, in fact, that it's urgent. And then I think governments will follow. We can't expect them really to lead too far in front of public opinion. I mean, it's up to us to inform ourselves. There's a room full of filmmakers to use your work to help inform the world about what's happening and to build the kind of consensus that we need to drive towards a solution.
Jim?
I would like to give an example to endorse what we've just heard. From Google Earth, there's a kind of spin-off little program called Earth Browser that you can look at the temperatures all around the world all the time of all the Met stations there are, the ocean temperatures from buoys and so on. And I watch it all the time as a person, not as a scientist. I'm just curious to know what's going on. Any of you can do this. And this summer, this year, I've been astounded to find how cold the Atlantic Ocean is compared with what it was the previous year. And this is particularly true of the Gulf of Mexico, which is about 8 to 10 degrees cooler than it was. One of the consequences was that the Hurricane Ike that came into the Gulf of Mexico this year, I think it was in September, instead of devastating Houston and the petrochemical industry of Eastern, fizzled down to a weak Category 2 hurricane and did a lot of damage, but nothing like it could have done had it happened the year before. Now, what is so interesting about this is that when I go to big climate centres here and in the United States, they do not know about this data. They, sure enough, their buoys out there in the ocean are measuring the temperature, but it all goes into a great big data store somewhere.
Prince Carlos?
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I think most of us agree with this, that the pen is mightier than the sword, and this is the pen that we have here. The amount of information we have now we've never had before, not just through Google, but through all the internet, and this notion that we are becoming more and more transparent. Innovation is more open source. There's much more cooperation than competition in knowledge building these days. And that will eventually push us forward. I'm quite convinced that no government can stay behind for too long.
So in other words, the information that we now have access to is kind of taking power out of the hands of governments because everyone can have access to it. And therefore, if the government is not acting or if a corporation is polluting and not stopping its bad behavior, it is accountable immediately, democratically, all around the world. Is that right?
What used to be done by the NGOs and the World Wildlife Funds and Greenpeaces of this world is now done by individuals. Mm-hmm. Well, that's an amazing change.
Okay. So I guess what you're suggesting is that the kind of exponential growth in technology may be enough to overcome the exponential growth in the problems we face. Is that too bold?
It can mitigate.
Well, isn't that what you're implying?
It can probably mitigate a lot of the things that we're doing, and the more options we have out there, the more flexible we can be in the future to solve the problems that we encounter, or the problems that come towards us. The more technical solutions we have, the easier it is to deal with them. But to completely mitigate the whole climate change, I don't know if we can actually do that. But if we don't do anything, we're going to sit back and let the wave roll over us, and I'm just not prepared to do that. And I think most of us are not prepared to do that.
I mean, I think there's a fundamental truth that we're all in this together. And I believe Dr. Lovelock wrote in one of his books that one of the most powerful things to come out of the space program was this image of the Earth from far away. And I think our ability to see that, and with all of the other information that one needs to understand to really know what's going on with the planet, I think that's a powerful concept that can move us forward.
Jim, I mean, I've got to bring this back to you because this morning you painted a scene of annihilation within a century. And the impression we get, I mean, these are very impressive presentations and ideas, but do you believe that these are sufficient to mitigate the negative effects of climate change in a meaningful way within that short timescale?
No, I don't. But we've got to have the knowledge, because otherwise we won't know what to do. We won't know what's happening. And this is where this comes in really important. I think that the most important thing we have to do as a species is survive. We don't want to become one of David's extinct species. We're much too valuable to the Earth. I often think of us as almost now like the photosynthesizers, which appeared, 3.5 or 4 billion years ago. When they first appeared on the planet and started pumping oxygen into the air, it must have been totally devastating, because it's a nasty, poisonous, carcinogenic gas. We've got used to it and adapted to it, but it is a very rotten gas to put into a planetary atmosphere. They polluted far worse than we ever do. And what did Gaia do? Turned it all to advantage, because from them came all the rest of life, trees, ourselves, everything. I kind of look on us as the very first intelligent species that is also a social species that is and can communicate, that has appeared on the planet. And the scale of the communication we've just seen. This is something quite precious as far as Gaia is concerned. It's never been there before. Sure, we made a mess, and we're going to have to evolve a lot of stages further before we get it right. But so did the photosynthesizers.
Special species, indeed. I mean, do you have any reason to see us in that light?
Specialists.
Special, in the sense
Special.
of unique, qualitatively.
Well, I think the important, a simple view of history is perfectly clear that we have evolved our cultures in different areas and spent a great deal of our energy fighting one another. And that was because we were blinkered. That was because we could only see as far as our own tribal frontier, or our own national frontier. And what we saw on the other side we didn't like, and assumed that it was antipathetic towards us, that we had to be aggressive towards it. What Google has done has to transform that situation, as you indicated. And for the first time, humanity has a chance to speak with a worldwide view. And we no longer can afford to say, well, it's okay for us, but we don't care about them. Because we now know enough of the working of the planet to realize that them are us. We are them. And we are one species. And that is a unique thing. And it is from many points of view, a hinge in history, which, if I may say so, you have been a cardinal mover in, and we ought to be very grateful to you. You can look at animal societies, of course, and see parallels to this. And an obvious parallel is a situation where all the inhabitants in a termite colony know what is happening in the termite colony because of something which is produced by the queen termite and which is circulated mouth to mouth throughout the colony at an extraordinary speed. So the colony knows this is the time to retract, or this is the time when we have to gather food, or whatever. Now, I'm not suggesting, of course, that there is any one person at the moment in the world who is in the position of the queen termite. But what we have to remember is that is in fact a danger, and that is why the wonderful things that your organisation has done is very crucial, but also has to be guarded. We have to look very carefully at who controls it. But once the consciousness which you have enabled us to have about the planet goes throughout the world, I see optimism, I see future, I see progress, I see the possibility that Homo sapiens might actually be able to do something about it.